What do you get when you mix Batman with the Joker in space and put them on a planet-sized Gotham and give them the most massive daddy issues in 40K? You get Konrad Curze, the Night Hunter. It's written by Guy Haley, one of my favorite 40K authors. But before we get started with the book review, make sure you give me a like and a subscribe in case you mess with my review. We're trying to grow here. We're going to read as many 40K novels as humanly possible in a lifespan, as long as Black Library keeps coming out with them. And I'd love for you guys to be there with me for the journey. So leave a comment too. Let's start a discussion. Tell me what you think about the book. Also, disclaimer, if I sound kind of nasally, I've been touched by Nurgle. Pause. And we're a little bit under the weather, but we love 40K and I love making YouTube videos so much that we're just going to power through anyway. So blessed be to the Plague Father, I guess. Konrad Curze, the Night Hunter, is a book about just that. Konrad Curze, the Night Hunter, and basically you get his perspective. Plenty of events that happened throughout the Horus Heresy, the Great Crusade, and even into his final days on Sanguelsa. Pretty much what we got here is a collection of Konrad Curze's stories from his own hideous mouth, and that's very interesting. You do get some floating narrator, so buckle up your damn seatbelts because we're about to see what goes on inside of this man's head, and we're going to get a real gaze into true insanity that is Curze. This book was kind of interesting because it is not a sequential story. It is stories coming from Konrad Curze. So I'm just going to talk about a few things that I liked. We're going to move on to the spoilers, and then we're going to move on from there. I would say the number one thing I've noticed about this book is Jonathan Keeble really killed it with Curze's rants and his monologue. Jonathan Keeble is, I think, the best narrator that Audible has for 40K, and this was his swan song in my opinion. I have never heard such good narration. He was so into it. It was like he was method acting. I fear for the people in the studio with him. Like, did he go around and torture a few people and, you know, like with a lighter or whatever, or like flicking them on the head to try to get into it because it was bone chilling. The narration was absolutely bone chilling, and I think that you won't be disappointed. This is one of the best looks at Curze that we've actually gotten in all of 40K. I've read the Night Lords trilogy. I read Unremembered Empire and a few short stories like The Prince of Crows. However, we've never been so intimate with Curze, pause, and we probably never want to again. This is more than likely my favorite trade of Primarch, and even I was just sort of like Curze, no, and you know, I feel bad for him, and I can't even talk about why. I will tell you more in the spoiler section. It did a great job of really showing us Curze's mental illness, and I think that Curze is bipolar. That's what it seems to be to me. I think he's also got this warped sense of justice. I'm going to use a One Piece metaphor. The admirals in One Piece all have a different style of justice that they adhere to. How bloodthirsty they are depends on what type of justice that they go towards. So a person who believes in absolute justice means that it's justice no matter the collateral damage, etc. That's just an example. But Curze is very similar to that. Curze is kind of like a One Piece admiral. He's got his own style of justice, and if Curze was a One Piece admiral, he would call his shit justice by pain, or justice by death, or just extreme justice, because Curze thinks that the only way that humans can learn is by pain and by being hurt, and he thinks that humans are always going to try to subvert the law, and you need to keep this fear. It should be the justice of fear, because he's going out of his way in order to make sure that people know. And what's even worse is that his philosophy is not 100% wrong, because the Night Lords did shed less blood because people were so afraid of their reputation that they would just surrender immediately. And while Curze's methods of justice are disgusting, a part of me can't argue with the results. So it's a very interesting look into that type of justice, if you will. It's definitely the most gruesome 40K book I've read, I think. I think that the Night Lords trilogy, the third book specifically, might be more gruesome. Possibly. But I don't think so. It's not just like Saw, where they vividly describe lots of scenes of torture or anything like that. It's just the mental anguish that you go through hanging out with Curze's victims. Curze's victims are in such desperate and awful situations, and Curze is such a monster that you have to feel for anybody that ends up crossing paths with the Night Hunter. Another pretty cool thing is that you do get cameos from some of the more famous Night Lords. I'm not going to talk about how much they're in the book, because you definitely get more Curze than anything, but you get a little bit of First Claw from the trilogy, not much. You get some Sevatar. Sevatar's in the book, so if you love Sevatar like I do, Jago Sevatorian. Sorry, it's just the J. For some reason, I don't want to pronounce the J's on words anymore, so that's going to be a theme. Shang was there. It was great to see some of the other Night Lords there, and I feel like they just kind of like put them in there just to, you know, fluff us a little bit, but that's okay. I like being fluffed. This is the spoiler section of the book. I'm going to talk about some more things I like, but it could be things that possibly spoil the book for you. So if you don't care about that, we're about to get to it. But if you do care, skip to my rating section and I'll tell you exactly why I think this is one of the best 40K books of all time. Okay, so we got to talk about the statue of the Emperor. This is probably one of the more disturbing parts of the book and why I said it's so gruesome. He took a bunch of body parts from a bunch of poor people and their skin and their faces, and he made a statue of the Emperor out of human body parts. And he was it's got 3 faces off of different people, and he was trying to chew on them and staple them on just to get it just right. And then when he gets the statue exactly how he wants to, sitting cold fused to a throne that he made and shit, he like sits down on top of a pile of body parts and starts fucking monologuing to this thing and thinking that it might talk back or retaliate. And what's even more disturbing is that it does talk back. We, as the readers, don't really know if it's implied that it's Curze's insanity, but at the same time though, like, was this the Emperor? Was that also implied? You tell me in the comments. Was that Curze just being insane? Was it the actual Emperor, or was it both? Curze's rants are some of the best parts of the book. Every chapter starts with it, ends with him screaming at the Emperor statue, screaming about how he's a bad dad, talking about why did he make him this way. He asked why didn't he tell his brothers that the Emperor approved of his methods. He's so anguished and insane. And this is one of the reasons I thought that Jonathan Keeble killed it so much. Curze's rants are some of my favorite parts of the book. And I think that it will make you feel really bad for him, because, man, this guy's brain is cooked. We actually get some adventures on Nostromo. He tortures a woman who's about to commit suicide because she's so sad that she lost her husband. And he talks about how her killing herself will send a bad message to the rest of the people. So he's going to torture the shit out of her and made her wish that she was going to die in another way, or make her wish that she was going to live. He's like, I see that you want to live now, but it's too late. I'm going to torture you so bad. And we see what it's like when he gets started, but you can assume that it doesn't go well for her. I got that story about the kid who had the 2 paths, and Curze saw him becoming a powerful leader that could help people, or him becoming a James Bond villain. I didn't know that was in this book. It's so great that I got to listen to that for myself, because other people's explanations don't do it justice. You just have to listen to it for yourself. What would you do in that situation? Was Curze wrong for killing him right then? I don't know. Maybe I would have had to take the chance. In my opinion, if I was Curze in that situation, I'd have let him grow up and been like, okay, well, let's see what happens. And if he turned out to go down the villain's path, we could always just go back and torture him. I don't see Curze had to kill the kid right there. But at the same time, you understand that he enjoys his job. As much as he talks about justice and stuff like that, you have to admit that Curze just likes torturing people. If we could just talk about Curze's insanity for just one more second, I think this is an important point to note, that he talks about all this justice, but at the same time, he admits to loving to hurt people. I think it goes back to that split personality thing a little bit I was talking about. We're going to talk about it during the Elver portion of the video, but he's kind of just full of shit. I thought it was also very interesting to get perspective from the Nostromo government and seeing how exactly Curze got so pissed at them. We're going to talk about that some more in the destruction of Nostromo part, but it's very interesting. Somebody got killed with a hammer, and I'm talking about like a judge's gavel. So very entertaining. The folks on Nostromo, no wonder all the Night Lords came out so fucked up. These guys are just fucked up by their very nature. Curze talked about Corvus. Corvus is actually in the book. Curze bombards a city to cover up the fact that he's killing a few of his own guys because they were enjoying torturing people. The Raven Guard find out about the bombardment, come down there. At the same time, Sevatar gets there to figure out what's going on, and Corvus questions him, and they have like a really tension-filled standoff where they could have came to blows right there. It didn't happen. Curze actually shares his true, and this is kind of crazy for Curze to be this honest, talking about why he was jealous of Corvus. He talks about his relationship with his other brothers, or lack thereof. He talks about how he tolerated most of them. He respected a few, and there's even a couple that he loved, but he hated Corvus. And he talks about the reasons that he doesn't hate Corvus, as he's like, he can't hate him because of, did he hate him because we're so similar? He's like, nah, that's not it. It's like, do I hate him because he is weak? He's like, no, I can't hate him because of that either. It was like, you know why I hate him? I hate him because he was so goddamn good at stealth, and his men too. And I thought that was very interesting. He said that Curze haunted the night, but Corvus owned it, and that's great. I love to see Curze put some respect on Corvus's name, because I read Deliverance Lost, and Corvus ain't putting no respect on Curze's name when he also gave his description of him. Because if you go back to Deliverance Lost, Corvus does talk about Curze, but he talks about how he is not his equal in battle. He felt like Curze had he's prone to emotional outbursts, and he could take advantage of that in a fair one. But when he actually saw Curze on Isfan 5 hit Curze's actual hatred, his aura, he was not ready for that shit, and it surprised him. And Corvus always felt bad about not trying to kill Lorgar and Curze right there at the same time. Curze, on the other hand, knows that Corvus is better at stealth, and he admits that, owning the night. But on the other hand, he said that he considered Corvus weak. In my opinion, and me and my friend Dreamer Chris, we're planning on making a tier list of the Primarch duelist. I think that Curze is pretty high up on that list. And if he says that Corvus is weak, there might be some legitimacy to that. But that being said, we have to take it with a grain of salt, because we have to understand that Konrad Curze is at least 25% bullshit. Sevatar is one of the more amazing parts in the book. If you're a Sev fan like I am, it's amazing to have Sev back and actually get some screen time and some dialogue for him. Oh, Sev is the man who makes the Night Lords what they are. He's a ruthless son of a bitch. He is a ridiculous fighter. He's there to get shit done. He's not trying, and he is down for the cause when it comes to Curze. Him and Shang both are two of his most loyal Night Lords, but they come at it from different perspectives. Shang looks at Curze like an actual father, and he's trying to take care of him and make sure that good things happen to him. He doesn't want to see anything but bad happen. But Sevatar, on the other hand, is a fucking soldier, and if Curze says this is what needs to be done, this is what needs to be done, and that's going to move us on over to the destruction of Prospero, which is where there's schism. They didn't really have a schism, but they had kind of a falling out there. Curze discovered that the Nostromans had switched governments on them. Old families killed the people that he put in power, and they decided to keep their best of the best for themselves, and they started emptying their jails and sending them to become the Astartes for the Night Lords. The Painted Count was also a part of this conspiracy, figuring that the soldiers that would come off of this, the Astartes, would be more loyal to him, and I don't think that anybody else knows this. They were trying to figure out what happened, but it caused a small schism within the Night Lords again, which is regular for them, I suppose, in the 40k age. Curze finds out about this, and he's so pissed that he decides, look, we just have to destroy the planet. We're going to send the ultimate message to these motherfuckers if they think they can play me. Don't they understand that I'm the Avatar of Justice? So he has Sev carry out the order. Shang finds out about it, and he doesn't talk to to Curze about it, but he's trying to get Sevatar to understand. And Sevatar is just sort of like, bruh, you're a weak hypocrite. Get out of my face. I'm going to pull the trigger because at the end of the day, it's something that you can't do. And it's such a... This is one of the best moments in the book. And some of the fleet actually don't want to fire on Nostromo, don't want to fire on their home. So what happens? Sevatar comes down there in Terminator armor with the Astramentar and takes out anybody who doesn't drop fire on the planet. And the story plays out like how you think it does. We have to talk about Elver. We have to talk about poor Elver. Oh man, can you say Stockholm Syndrome? Elver is part of a space frigate of men who find Curze's coffin, and at the end of, I don't think it's at the end of Unremembered Empire, it's another Horus Heresy book, Sanguinius launches him out of an airlock in a stasis tube, and these guys come across Konrad Curze. They decide they're going to get some money off of him. One of these guys, Elver, is a latent psyker who can see the future, and it's like, we gotta get this thing the fuck out of here. Naturally, they don't listen to him. He goes into his room, does drugs, and gets drunk like usual, because that's his thing. And when he comes back out, Curze is free. At first, they're trying to blame it on him, but meanwhile, Curze is lurking on the ship and already murdering people. He actually is able to get out, I think, because of Elver. He's able to, while he was in stasis, he says he was able to see through Elver's eyes. Curze also is a latent psyker, more powerful one for sure, but I think that it's not explained how he escaped, but I'm gonna assume that he gained consciousness in some type of way, or maybe one of the other spacers did free him. Maybe it was chaos. He whittles away at everybody, and eventually Elver's kind of by himself, and he's just hiding. And then he runs into a assassin. I think he's from the Sniper Temple. I don't remember what you call those guys, but we're gonna call him Gun. He basically is like gonna take, Elver knows the ship, so he's using Elver to get around the ship, and he's like, I'm gonna kill you soon, but it'd be better to die from me than to die from Konrad Curze, which is true. And eventually they do run into Curze, and he gets like a few shots in, but Curze murders him pretty easily. And then he sees Elver, and he's like, don't run, bitch, don't run. And Elver does try to run, and he stops him, and Curze like knocks him the fuck out. When Elver wakes back up, he is tied to his captain's command throne, and he's the last person alive. He's missing 2 of his fingers, and Curze is asking him questions like, hey man, look, do you know how to steer the ship? Because if you do, I might be able to use you. Otherwise, I'm gonna torture you very bad. And Elver basically just has no choice but to agree. He asks him why he needs him, because he basically already knows how to steer the ship himself. Elver realizes that Curze doesn't even really need his help to control the ship, so he asks him why. Why did he leave him alive? And Curze actually is truthful with him. He's just like, well, I need company. I need someone to talk to, otherwise I'm gonna get bored. And he frees him, except for leaving the chains on him. And Elver is just sort of like, what happened to my fingers? And Curze says, I got bored. So Elver's life living with Curze for the next few years was absolutely terrifying to listen to. It was a lesson in morbidity that I was not prepared for coming into this novel. Even though knowing it's a Curze novel, I probably should have seen something like this coming. But oh my goodness, over the course of these years that they're on the ship, Curze does end up torturing this guy out of boredom. And he plucks out one of his eyes. He like nibbles away at one of his legs. He slowly tears the flesh off one of his arms to the point that he needs a prosthetic to replace it. And then what's crazy about that is that Curze on certain times would be completely normal. He would even like teach him things about the universe to broaden his horizons, and he could kind of see like the kind of thing that Curze could have become had he not gone batshit insane. And Elver develops a level of Stockholm Syndrome. I think one of the most fucked up things is that Curze would just be gone for weeks at a time, and he wouldn't know where he was at on the ship. He would just be going about his life, and Curze would just pop up, and sometimes he could just see signs of him. One of my favorite parts in the book is this mention that he came across a little gravesite that Curze had made. He basically crucified 50 rats with little tiny crucifixes and had insides hanging out, and some of them were even alive because you can see their little hearts still beating. And I'm just in the car screaming like, Curze, what the fuck is wrong with you? The ending of the book was really amazing. Basically, it plays, if you know the story of Curze, you basically know how it plays out with the assassin. But he's telling the story that same day. He's been ranting to the statue of the emperor, and it gets now to the point where he's like, is coming close. And the statue finally starts talking back, and it tells him all the stuff that he doesn't want to hear about how none of this was his fault, how it forgives him for his actions. Sanguinius told Curze that, and he suspected that he might be right about that. He feared that. As a listener, we have to determine whether or not this is just Curze's insanity and his own subconscious talking to him, or if it's actually like partially the emperor or something like that. I believe that it is mostly his insanity, because the emperor in there implies that he can't be talking to him. So it's kind of like a little, I don't know, that's how I interpret it. The emperor says, only mistake that you made was believing that you didn't have a choice in the matter. He says that the future is never set, and his biggest mistake was co-signing himself. He didn't have to be these things. Like, he didn't have to be a monster. He didn't have to be evil. He didn't have to be insane. And Curze is just screaming at this point. He's like, no. And this is when some of the narration from Sir John Keeble actually like is at its peak. And I just really enjoyed the moment, and it really made me feel for Curze. He's not right in any kind of way, and he shouldn't be. I think he deserves everything that happened to him. But on the other hand, though, like, you can't help but to feel for this insane person. He hides his memoirs that he's been writing, and he contemplates like maybe he could have changed it, but at a certain point, if he changed his whole philosophy, it might be a whole different book. And he makes his way to his room. He sits down and decides that if there is a choice in the matter, this is the choice he's making. He chooses to let things play out the way his vision saw, because we all know the famous line, death is nothing compared to vindication. So I give Konrad Curze Night Hunter 10 out of 10 flayed people. It is one of my favorite 40K books. Put it up there with the Night Lords trilogy books, because we've never had this good of a look at Konrad Curze and got things from his perspective. We got some Corvus in the book. The book was just really amazing. Jonathan Keeble is at his peak. I mean, he always puts up great performances anyway. Like, he's amazing. He's the best. But at the same time, though, I think that this is his swan song, his bat song, whatever you prefer. So that's the end of the video. Hope that you guys liked my explanation of Konrad Curze. It was a little bit all over the place, but the book was a little bit all over the place. And because it's from Curze's point of view, I like that. So leave a comment in the comments. Do you think that this book is as hype as I think it is, or am I just glazing the Night Lords? Also, let me know what you thought about it too. Like, give me your interpretation on Curze. Was he doomed? Is this the Emperor's fault, or is it Curze's fault? Because I'm somewhere in between. Thanks for watching the video. This is Ave Dominus News saying Ave Dominus Nox.